And it's recording. Hello, everybody.
Hello, we're Cesar and Pam with cesarandpam.com.
And we want to help you grow your business or career without losing your family in the process, specifically your parenting, your kids. We're going to talk about a really difficult subject today, difficult for us, and I think it's very difficult for most parents. I actually admire parents that are really good at this. I think some people are naturally good at this. I am not naturally good at this. And the title is, Do Your Teens Not Like You? Oof. Do they get mad when you try to say something to them? Do they even laugh at you when you try to give your opinion about a certain subject? We are going to tell you why that's the case. If you have kids, write in the comments. Even if you're watching a recording, write in the comments how many kids do you have, what their ages are, and we're going to talk about this subject that blood, sweat, and tears to learn, right, honey?
We're still learning.
Learning.
I mean, I just spent the morning teaching, subjects like Latin with our 13-year-old and our 12-year-old. And I was getting so frustrated because I was like, guys, come on. On Mondays, they go to class with another teacher. I'm like, you don't do this with your other teacher, with Mrs. Hodges. I mean, you guys don't argue between each other, bother each other. And then just, I don't know, the way they said something, I'm like, you don't talk like that to Mrs. Hodges. And I'm like, well, just having this discussion that we just had in Spanish, I'm like thinking, oh man, how are they seeing me,
Yeah, so here's a test. Have somebody tell your kid, close your eyes. Number one. And number two, have them ask your child or your teenager, picture the face of your mom or picture the face of your dad. And then the third question is, are they smiling? That is a true test. Many kids will say, I remember doing this with somebody and they said, oh, my mom is like this. So.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. If a child turns his face to the person that smiles and is delighting them, just like a sunflower turns to the sun. And sometimes, I mean, I know this when they're little, they just, when someone cares about them and shows them attention and is smiling, I mean, they're all smiles back, right? And I don't know why it's harder to apply with my older ones. I'm thinking, I don't know, if you ask them to close their eyes after just spending the morning with me, they'll be like, no, she was not smiling. And it's harder. Why is it so hard?
Well, how many of you have teenagers and you're brokenhearted because the sweet little boy or the sweet little girl that used to love you and adore you and they thought you were the best, now they don't want to even talk to you. We talked about it last week. Why do kids not want to talk to you? And we're going to complete today that conversation because we talked about young children last week, but now we're going to talk about teenagers. We have 6 kids, ages 26 to 12, right? 1 girl, 5 boys. The oldest is a girl, and then the boy, Natalia and Cesar Jr. They're out of the house, they're married, but we still have 4 at home. Nicholas, who's 20, Marco, who's 16, Jaden, who's 13, and Lucas, who's 12. And I'm going to be honest with you, this has been the hardest transition for me in my parenting, and I've made the biggest mistakes not transitioning from parenting a small child to a teenager. And here's the biggest thing, the first principle we want to share with you. When your kids are born, they demand total control. They need total control from you. You decide when to feed them, when to put them to sleep, when to change them, when to check to make sure they're healthy, when to do everything. They're not self-sufficient at all, or they would die. They require total control. But they gradually need less and less control.
Yeah, and when they're little and you're showing that control, they think you're Superman. Dad is Superman. Mom is Wonder Woman. You know what's right and you know what's best for them. But then they start growing and they start seeing, Superman's cape has a little hole. He's not perfect.
Because he is underwear.
Yeah, Mom was kind of losing it there. She didn't have a very good attitude about that. They start to realize that we we aren't perfect, right?
Yeah. So the transformation has to take place where you start treating your young ladies and young men, your teenagers, as the future adults that they are becoming already. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have some limits. We're going to talk about it on another episode, but about respect and about obedience and about consequences. But right now, we want to focus on your attitude, mom, on your attitude, dad. Are you delighting in them? Are your kids like a sunflower when they talk to you? If you're not, then they're gonna turn their faces to a group who will. And I've been guilty of that just because that line is so imperceptible almost from when they're little kids, and you can just give them a sermon, give them a lecture, and they will do what you said. You quickly correct them because that's what it takes. That's what it takes when they're little. But later, you cannot do that. They're becoming adults, and that's not how you would treat any adult in your life, right?
And it's hard to see them as adults because we're the ones that see the inconsistencies, the immaturity in their life still. But, why is it that they want to spend time with someone else outside of the home? They're probably receiving affirmation. I know we talked about this happening with one of our sons who's super social, and everybody loves him. And so why would he want to come home to mom, who's the one that's criticizing, finding things wrong, telling him the things he didn't do, that still, what he wasn't good at, he's not going to want to spend time at home. Why would I be surprised?
There comes a time when you need to stop correcting them in front of other people. You stop correcting them the way they eat, for example. Because if you went out to eat with a friend and they told you, hey, don't use your finger, use your fork. Hey, don't chew with your mouth open. They'll be like, what? You're not my mom. And that will be the last time they go out to eat with you. They'll be like, oh man, what a pain to going out to eat with this guy or this lady, right? So I was reading this book years ago, and there was a study, a very interesting study, and the author's talking about how Proverbs 15:30 says, bright eyes gladden the heart in the Bible. And he talks about a study where a number of college men were given 10 pictures of college-aged women who are nearly equally attractive. Each student was then asked to rate the pictures from most attractive to least attractive. What these young men did not know was that 5 of the women had been given an eye drop solution just before their pictures were taken. This solution dilated the pupils in their eyes, the same thing that happens naturally when we are really glad to see someone. The results of the study were just as we might expect. The girls with the bright eyes were chosen hands down as the 5 most attractive women in these pictures.
Wow. So it's really our attitude that makes us attractive and draws them in, right?
Yeah. And okay, here's another amazing book. Feeding Them the Mouth That Bites You. Great book about adolescence. We're going to talk about in another episode on how to proactively give them that freedom. From the time they're 12, 13, they're longing to be free. And there needs to be an emancipation period, the author calls it, where they feel respected, they feel honored, and there are consequences for not obeying too, but they're not being treated like children anymore.
Yeah, it's that our role has to change. It talks about how when they're young, we're like policemen, we're like the cops. We're checking in on them, making sure, hey, what are you doing? Don't do that. Trying to protect them all the time. And we have to transition from that to
being a judge. So, for example, if you would ask a cop, at a Starbucks, hey, officer, I got a question. How much jail time would I do for possession of drugs? He might be like, why? You got some drugs on you? Let me check your trunk, right? Versus a judge, if you're having a conversation with a judge is not trying to prevent crime. They'll tell you, well, in the state of Texas, it's such and such. In the state of New York, it might be a little different. Why? Because he will deal with the case when it comes across his desk weeks later, okay? So as parents of teenagers, we need to start morphing into that type of authority. How many of you had a similar conversation with your teenage boy? For example, a mom saying, hi, sweetie, how was your day? Fine. How was your math test? Fine. Who was the girl you were talking to when I drove up? Just a girl. Could you stop asking me all these questions? Okay, why would that happen? Why is that happening, honey?
Well, they think you're going to come in and critique or try to control. Oh, you didn't study enough for your math test. That's why I'm checking. I'm checking to see if you did well enough. If you can have my approval there. Oh, that girl, I want to know who she is. Is she good enough for you? Would that be a good person for you to go out with? What's her motive?
So that is the most complicated aspect of parenting teenagers. I believe parenting teenagers. It's seeing the transition, moving from control to influence. Mm-hmm. John Maxwell, a leadership expert, talks about leadership is nothing more, nothing less than influence, the ability to persuade someone. That's how you persuade and lead other people. Some of you may have organizations that you're leading in your job, in your business, and yet with your kids, like they won't listen to you. Why? Because they're becoming adults and you need to increase your influence. How? Through communication.
What I found interesting is that I didn't think, I'm not even trying to control when I ask those questions. I just really want to know, but they're so used to us controlling their lives. And if we haven't affirmed that we have given them control in that area, you know what? I trust you. You can pick your friends. You're old enough. I don't control that. I'm just curious. I just wanted to know about this person. You really have to verbalize and vocalize that you've given up control in that area for them to really believe it. Because you may believe it, you may think you have, but what we found is that if you haven't taken the time to communicate that with them, then they still think that you're trying to control. You're holding the strings, right?
And we're going to go over that in another episode from this amazing book, Feeding the Mouth that Bites You, where he talks about teenagers need to go through a proactive process of emancipation where they become free, right? So, but let's just talk about the attitude first. If, for example, you tell your teenager, be home, they ask you, what time do I need to be home? Be home at a reasonable hour. And they get home at 2 a.m. and you're freaked out. And then when they get home, you give them a sermon, you give them a lecture. And in their mind, they're thinking, well, that was reasonable. Unreasonable would have been 5 a.m. But in your mind, no, you expected midnight, right? Well, you need to be clear and specific. That's another tip whenever you give them a guideline. Influence is the better and long-term lasting avenue of friendship with your kids. Taking away financial support, making them feel guilty. As a mom, like, honey, you don't know how it worries me when you get home so late at night. It won't work anymore.
Or using financial support like as a means of control, right?
Yeah, best case, they think is hilarious that you're trying to control them as little kids when they're adults. Worst case, they will not want to have contact with you. And I'll be honest with you, that's an area where I struggle so much. Many times I have to apologize to my adult kids because either I try to control them indirectly by showing disapproval, and I think they were afraid to share what they were really thinking with me. And that's not what you want in a friendship, right? So it's strategically letting go of control. It doesn't mean that you're giving up influence on your teenager. You're simply replacing it with communication. And the author says that you'll find out that when you give freedom in a particular area, for example, he talks about teenagers have different territories in their lives. They have their room, they have their friends, they have the music they like, they have the clothes they like to wear, the curfew, what time they want to go to bed. And he says that you need to gradually start giving them freedom, one at a time. Once you give them freedom, for example, music, what would it look like to give them the freedom in the music they listen to?
Well, I think it's interesting because we used to try to control this with our older ones. We had a certain genre of music or, standard that we held for our family. And, you just need to realize that you can't even control that. There's so much technology. There's so many ways and places to listen to music that you can't even control it. So that's a really good area to give up because, like it or not, you don't have control of their music. And so all you have is influence and communication. Well, that's what you want to have. You want to have influence and communication. So yeah, you just let them know, hey, your dad and I have talked, and we really trust you that you're gonna listen to music that is good for you, and that you like. And we would just ask, you have younger siblings, so the things that we consider appropriate, and if there's anything that is inappropriate, we don't want it played out loud in our home. And you put some limits, but you just let them know that you're not going to be checking to see what they're listening to. It's their decision.
Respect them as you would respect an adult. And today is more relevant than ever with the presidential election that is so divided. We live in the U.S. and people tend to cancel each other and just hate each other if you don't agree with their political affiliation. What a great opportunity, and this is something that I'm just recently learning and applying, to allow your kids to think differently than you, to disagree with them and be okay with it.
And be able to have conversations, because that should open up the communication. If they don't think you're going to try to control it, then you can talk about, hey, so what is it you like about that artist? And when you hear that, doesn't it bug you? Because this is how it affects me. Does that bother you? And listen to them.
Yeah, but be like, hey, but I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to it.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's your thing.
Yeah.
But if your kids are not opening up about certain subjects, it's probably because they feel that you're going to judge them. They don't feel free to open up their minds to you. Check out this conversation, right? Say that a mom asks his kid, his 13, 14-year-old, ask what? Her kid. Oh, thank you.
Her son.
Yeah, her son. And hey, where's your friend that was going to pick you up? And he's like, oh, he didn't come. He canceled on you at the last minute again? Instead of being like, I can't believe it, blah, blah, blah. I tell you, he's not a good friend. He doesn't care about you. No, instead of saying that, well, the son would reply, Mom, I told you, he forgot. He had to do some stuff for his dad. He's a good guy. The way the mom should respond here in this situation is, hey, who you're friends with is up to you. I have no idea if he's a good guy or not. Besides, you're too old to have your mom tell you who's a good guy. I'm just saying, if it were me, I think I feel a little bit blown off. And the son may say, once he felt that you gave him a little room, it does bug me a little. And you can say then, well, whatever, I'm sorry it happened again. What about that guy in your soccer team, Carlos? He seems pretty cool. Yeah, he's great, but he lives 20 minutes away. Wow, that's a long way. And that's a good point, honey, that you brought up on the Spanish live that we just did. You don't necessarily have to have a solution for everything they bring up.
I think we want to be the solution givers, and it translates into a sermon. And usually we've rehearsed it in our head and we've been thinking about it, and we come to them with this great discussion. It's not a discussion, it's a sermon. And we think they're listening, but it's like, or actually we don't think they're listening. We're like, listen, are you listening to me? No, they're not listening. They have tuned you out, that doesn't work.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to end it right here. We're going to continue next week. And we really want to encourage you, if you have a situation like that, write in the comments or send us a message. We do private coaching for those people who like to have coaching, because we believe that why shall it profit a man to gain the whole world if he loses his soul? Why shall it profit a man or a woman to gain the whole world if he loses his family or her family? So I know that many of you have your own business, you have your career, you want to be successful in it, and you feel like you may have to sacrifice your parenting, but you don't have to. You can have both if you are a good manager of the resources that God has entrusted you with. We want to help you with that. So send us a question, comments, things that have worked for you, things that have not worked for you. And if you know of a person who you think will benefit from this information, share the link, like it, subscribe to our channels, follow us on cesarandpam.com. And
yeah, think of something positive that you can say to your teenager today. Show them that smile, that affirmation that maybe they haven't received in a while from you. We're Cesar and Pam with cesarandpam.com.
Show them your love. Open up your ears. We believe in you. Thank you. See you on the next one.